Okay, gotcha. And my dad got his great job with superintendent of public instruction and later with community colleges where he actually made money so he could buy some stuff he wanted to buy. And one of the things he wanted to buy, right away he told us he wanted to get a sailboat. And I don't know if my dad had ever sailed before. I mean, he grew up in North Dakota and Minnesota. Well, they have lakes in Minnesota. But he really, really wanted to sail. My mother didn't want him to sail. She did not want to sailboat because she was never going to get on it. But I guess his ancestry of being 100% Norwegian, I think that meant he was like a Viking or something. He wanted to sail the sea, so he insisted on buying a sailboat. He bought a Santana, which was a small sailboat. It still had a cabin, and it was 22 feet long on the water line, which is how you measure a sailboat. And it had a cabin and everything that we needed for sailing. And Dad taught himself to sail by reading books. That's the way he learned things. I don't know if he ever even took a lesson. Maybe he did. He probably did, because when I was in high school, did I pay attention to what my dad did? Not all that much. But he did learn a lot of things from books, all about navigating and how to take care of your boat and how to, read the charts and go north of Olympia and all these different things. And so we got it and we started sailing right here in Olympia. And for many years, well, as long as I was still at home, before I went to college, we sailed in the winter, we sailed on Saturdays for the Saturday races. And in the summer, we sailed on Wednesday nights for the races with the South Sound Sailing Society. And let me tell you about our little boat. Now, it was called the Tardy Troll. I think the troll was the Norwegian part. I don't know if the tardy was because maybe he'd been wishing for a boat for a long time and he thought being 40 was old and he was tardy. I don't know what it meant. I don't know. But you walk down into the cabin, and on the right side and the left side, there were bunks. And then underneath one side, there was a place to put, there was like a refrigerator where you would put a block of ice. And then there was a water tank because we'd get fresh water when we were at a marina. And the other side had bins for storing stuff and sails and things like that and our personal belongings. Well, there wasn't a lot of room. My mother, who absolutely was not going to go on a sailboat trip, and in fact, in all the years they had sailboats, she went on one trip, but she made up all this stuff for us. She got those like drawstring bags. I think she probably, I'm trying to think of where you could buy things like that in 1966, but since she got them at the marine store, Dad had blue, Kari had yellow, my sister Kari, and then I had orange. And then she stenciled our names on each of the bags so we would know this was Dad's clothes and this was mine, etc. And then we were sleeping in sleeping bags. I don't think I still have those, but they were the kind of flannel on the outside with plaid and then stuffed with something that after you wash them a few times, they got really lumpy. Okay. But Mom made these like pillow slips, sheet slips for us where she sewed some sheets together and put Velcro on the side. And then you could sleep in your sleeping bag and be sweaty or stinky or have mud or, kelp on your feet or whatever. And if you needed to wash your bed, you just washed your sheets when you got to the marina that had laundry. And then she did the shopping because our kitchen was very tiny and she found some recipes for things that we could make one pot dinners and got the recipes and bought all the supplies for us. And nothing that had to be refrigerated. And we got milk and fresh vegetables when we stopped at places. That's all the stuff we had because it was a very simple refrigerator. So that was that kind of area. And then when you got a little farther up in the bow, there was the triangle-shaped bunk. That was Dad's bunk. And right in front of the triangle, kind of shaped out like this, there was the head. Now, if you're not familiar with sailing, a head is a toilet. Sometimes when people say the head, they actually mean there's like a shower and a sink. No, we had a toilet and a plunger. And there was a little curtain that went across it, so that was your privacy. Now, the inside of this boat was not very high. Now, my sister and I are like 5'2", 5'4". We could walk in there fine. My 6-foot tall dad couldn't go in standing straight. He always had to walk in like this. So try to imagine how he urinated. He had to kneel on the floor. It's like bowing to the throne or something, you know. Get the curtain behind him. Well, no, maybe he didn't have to do that. So whatever, that was that, but he never complained. And then one other part that really goes with the story is that on each side, at the end of these bunks, and before you went in past the head, there was a little counter like this big that had an alcohol fueled stove. Now, alcohol, the fumes from alcohol go up instead of down, and so you had to cook with an alcohol stove so that you didn't blow your boat up. And the other side was a little stainless steel sink that it had a faucet and a pump that hooked up with our fresh water, and it was just big enough for a tea kettle to fit in. That's an important part of the story. For our stove, we had a tea kettle, a sauce pot with a lid, medium size, and a frying pan, small. Those were our cooking utensils. I was the cook for dinner and the lunch maker. My sister did all the dishes and Dad fixed breakfast for us. He never fixed breakfast at home, but he fixed breakfast for us. His favorite breakfast, which he didn't fix every day, was corned beef hash and eggs baked in the frying pan, I guess, or maybe in the pot. When I cooked, well, I was going to say we could only get water when we were at marinas, and we didn't stay at marinas every night. We went someplace different every day, almost, when we went on our big long vacation cruises. And so we could only use a little bit of water. Of course, our head was flushed with seawater. We washed our dishes in seawater and then rinsed them off for their last rinse with a tiny bit of fresh boiled water. We washed our hands with a measure of fresh water. Couldn't just pump it out of the pump. Nope, then you'd use up too much water. And in fact, for our cooking every day, in the morning, we heated 2 kettles of boiling water. I mean, one after the other. The first one was for coffee and cocoa and washing our face and hands. And the second one was for washing the dishes, I guess. I don't remember. No, probably if we had instant oatmeal, we had to save some of that water for instant oatmeal. And then at nighttime, we could make 2 kettles of hot water. It was enough for making instant rice, instant potatoes, or instant like top ramen. And it was for cocoa and Dad's coffee. And then it was for washing our face and hands again and rinsing off the dishes. And that was it. Couldn't use any more. The rule was 3 squares of toilet paper each time you used the toilet paper. Those were the rules for my sister and me. We didn't exactly follow them, but I still think sometimes 3 squares a day. So that was what it was like in our spot. And when Dad first started sailing, he never wanted to use the motor. We had a small outboard motor, and he never wanted to use it. He was going to sail all the way to Seattle or whatever. And I don't know if you've been out on the water in the summer in Olympia, but the wind doesn't blow actually. And there were times when we went out and we just like drifted around for like the whole day. And after we learned to steer, after my sister and I learned to steer, Dad would say, I'm gonna go have a nap. He'd go down there, he said, just tie the rudder off and watch in case we go too close to the side, to the beach. And that's sometimes what we did. And I remember there are pictures of me laying on the bow reading paperback books in my swimsuit, just lazing around. And that's what Dad loved the most. So when we were traveling, he liked to go places where we had to anchor, like little inlets and stuff. And oftentimes we were the only boat in the place that we were. And maybe there were 2 or 3 boats, but because they didn't have a dock or anything, we were all quite a ways far from each other, so that we didn't bump into each other with we were on anchor. And Dad loved that. He'd get up early in the morning, make his coffee, sit out in the cockpit, just watch the sun, and Kari and I would sleep, which is why he made breakfast for us to wake us up. And in the evening, he liked to do that too, just sit and watch. But Kari and I liked a little bit more action being teenagers. So on the days when we actually went to a marina and tied up at the marina, we were so excited. We had to take the trash. We had to go, I mean, Dad did all this with us, of course, but we had to get the ice blocks. We had to get water from the, wherever the water was. And I guess we needed gasoline sometimes for our outboard motor. But it also meant that we could get up and we could take our whole handful of quarters, we could get a shower. Kari and I thought that was great. We could buy Cokes in the machine. We could get candy bars. But most of the places we went to where there was actually a marina were just tiny little spots. There was no town or anything. And maybe there was like one shop that sold parts for your boat if your boat fell apart, but we weren't near anything. And then there was the day that we got to go to Friday Harbor. We were taking a cruise, we were cruising up into the San Juans, and we got to Friday Harbor. And it was fabulous. There were hundreds of boats there. I think hundreds, seemed like it. There were so many boats at the marina that there was no room for us to tie up. So we had to anchor out in this open, what I call Friday Harbor, in the harbor. And there were other boats there. And there were speedboats coming back and forth. And there were big yachts parked there. And just lots of little sailboats. And there was, like, the University of Washington had a marine science program there. So this whole side of the harbor, you could see all these buildings and lots of people. And then when you went, there were college kids all over the place. And Kari and I wanted to go so bad to see a real town. Well, one little problem that we had was that our dinghy only held 3 people. And you think that sounds fine. But if you have a really big garbage bag, you can only hold 2 people and a garbage bag. And Dad said, you girls go. Take the garbage bag. I'm going to take a nap. I'll see you later. So we got in there. We even took our purses. That's how excited we were. And we went up the ramp and we dumped our trash. And then we went, oh, look at that. There's stores. There's like souvenir stores, and there's restaurants, and there's this store and that store. And we walked on like there was a 3 blocks long town. It was, and full of people. It was so exciting. And there was a movie theater, an actual little old-fashioned movie theater that showed movies on Friday night and Saturday night at 7 o'clock. And we were there on a Saturday. I said, oh, we could stay and go to the movies. And I don't know what it was, but I'm sure it was something we wanted to watch. And we had money because we brought our purses. And then one of us said, it won't be over till 9, and that's going to be getting close to dark. And Dad might worry about us, because as most of you know, maybe Natalie doesn't know this yet, she's pretty young, there were no such things as cell phones in 1966. So we couldn't call Dad and tell him that we were going to stay late. Well, we said, oh, we better not go to the movie. Okay, let's keep looking around. And then after we looked at everything, we smelled the perfect place. Oh, French fries, real French fries, burgers, real burgers. And right there we saw a little diner that even had booths lined up at the counter, and you could get hamburgers, French fries, and chocolate milkshakes. So much better than canned chicken and canned green beans served with instant rice. It sounded really good. So we went in and we ordered our burgers, and we sat up there at the counter and we ate it all up, and we were, oh God, we're so full, I'm gonna eat every bit of this. milkshake, and then we went down to the water, got back in the dinghy, rowed back to the boat, and it was actually starting to get, this kind of darkness, although that was in the summer, so it's a lot later than it is now. And Dad said, "Well, I'm so glad to see you." We'd been gone for hours. And we said, "It was so fun. It was so fun, Dad. We did this and this and this, and we wanted to go to the movie, but we decided you might be worried." And da 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 da. And the best part was we went to this burger place and we had a hamburger and French fries and a chocolate shake. And Dad said, "Did you bring me one?" No, we didn't. But my dad wasn't one to get pissed off or anything. He said, "Well, I've been waiting for you and I'm kind of hungry." "Okay, Dad." And it was really getting dark now, time to start to just stay inside. So I opened a can of tomato soup and got out the box of saltines. And that's what I gave my dad for dinner that night. But still, every once a couple months, I go to the store and I get a can of corned beef hash and make corned beef hash and eggs and think about my dad. So that's that story. And then I kind of have a wrap up that goes with it. 30 years later, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He didn't have sailboats anymore, but he and Mom were still here living in Olympia. And I visited him a little bit when I was living in Santa Fe, and then I moved up here. But one of those days, it was before I moved here, we couldn't have complicated conversations anymore, but we could reminisce about stuff, and we could talk about what we saw around us, like, look at those cute little sailboats towing themselves back to the marine or to the yacht club. And we were down here walking around because Dad loved to walk down. And I was talking about some of the things we'd done on the boat. And he looked at me and said, "Randy, did you go sailing with me?" I was startled. I said, "Well, yeah, Kari and I both. Even when we were in college, we came back in the summer to go on the cruises with you, Dad." And he stood there and he held his hand out like this. I knew exactly what he was going to tell me. He remembered my head as an infant in his hand and my folded up feet right here. He said, "I remember you when you were this little. And I look at you now and I know you're my daughter, but I don't know how you got from here to here." Oh, touched my heart. And since then, I often think my favorite stories are personal stories because I'm brave enough to get up and tell you my story. And I hope it reminds you of some things that have happened to you, some of your stories, and we can keep sharing them and bringing them along. And clear to the last day that my dad lived, I was sitting holding his hand. He couldn't talk anymore. He was definitely bedridden. And I described going down to the boat and getting ready to go sailing. And as soon as I started talking, maybe it was just my voice, but I think it was telling him the stories about sailing. Thank you.
Oh, what a wonderful story, Randy. And although I've heard it before, this one was even better.
Oh, good. But it's still not as good as the one you like the best.
No, I think it maybe is.
Oh, okay.
I remember you telling this story, and I'm sure your dad remembered that trip for many, many years until he had Alzheimer's. And I also remember you telling about how he was so adamant about not using the motor that it took you all day to get to Boston Harbor, which is 3.2 miles up the road here. You could walk there in a couple of hours, but it took them all day to get there. So what a wonderful story. Thank you. Well, our featured teller tonight is Mitch Nelson, who also came into storytelling about the same time I did. He's progressed a little bit faster. Mitch has gone from storytelling and he's added to that a lot of humorous stories, impromptu telling. He's even worked that into some dancing up at the Eagles Club. But anyway, he's a great storyteller, and tonight Mitch has come to us all the way from Riverton, Wyoming. In the past, he's lived in Salt Lake City, and I think he's probably traveled that 600-mile trip many times to come and give stories to us every month. But tonight, he's on Zoom. So here he is. Mitch, take it away.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
All right. That's a good sign, maybe, for me. Um, man, I had a whole list of stuff I was going to do, and it feels like none of it works on Zoom, but I'm going to do it anyway. So the first one, I tried this over here in Riverton. They don't have, or I haven't found an open mic where you go on stage and just sing your song or tell your story and then sit down. But they do have this thing called a jam session. There's two in two different towns each week, and so I've been going to that, and I found this song in one of the Scary Stories to Tell books. This is the version that's in Scary Stories 3 that you can find at the library. It goes like this. Did you ever think as the hearse goes by that you may be the next to die? Boom, boom. They wrap you up in a big white sheet from your head down to your feet, boom, boom. And the worms crawl in and the worms crawl out in your stomach and out your snout. And your eyes fall out and your teeth decay. And that is the end of a perfect day. Boom, boom. So, hey. So I said that I sang that to a group that was maybe a generation to half a generation older than me, and they started singing along with me. So I didn't realize it was a popular song. It was kind of a new one to me, but it had been a grade school song for a lot of these people that I thought was really interesting. So now I keep turning to look at these cats that are chasing nothing. So I got you started thinking about death, and it's true. I've been thinking about death lately, and I don't want you to worry about me. It's not like that. It's just the season. It's Halloween, and I was thinking about death, and I have this whole series about the big bad wolf, how it's not really his fault, and it made me wonder, about death and how death gets kind of a bad rap. And you've all heard the story about the guy that saw death in one town and was like, "Oh no, I got to get out of here. He's here for me." And so he ran to this other town, and death was surprised to see him later in that other town and said, "Well, this was where our appointment was, so I was surprised to see you in the first town." And so yeah, people are always coming up to death and just being afraid and fearful. And I don't like to compare myself to death like that, but there are times just being disabled when I'll walk into a room of total new people that I've never met before, and I do get some of those fearful looks. Who's this guy? What is it? What do we need to do to help him? And how, it's usually really friendly towards me, but yeah, you can see the fear and the tension. And so I kind of feel for death when he walks into a room and people get scared. Some people, other people have tried to fool death. There's another story about the lady who said, "Oh, I'm not today, Death. Can we do it tomorrow?" And Death thought, all right, let's do it tomorrow. And he said, "Well, I'm going to just write this on the door so that I remember that we're going to do this tomorrow." And so on the doorpost, he wrote tomorrow. Well, she was excited about that because when tomorrow came, of course, she got to point at the doorpost and say, "Look, you said tomorrow." And Death was really busy that day. And so he's like, "Oh, yeah, okay." And it took him almost a week before he finally realized and erased tomorrow from her doorpost. And finally, they went and did their business. Well, it's these stories that make me wonder. And it's these stories that helped me follow a little trail, and I came across this final story that I'm going to flesh the whole thing out for you tonight. It's about a lady who really surprised death. Now he's a busy guy, of course. There's a lot of people dying every day, and one day though he went to this house, and her name was Rose, and he knocked on the back door. And she opened the door, and instead of the shock and the horror and the fear and the somberness and the pleading, she said, "Oh my goodness, you're just in time. Please come in." And so in he came, thinking this was the weirdest thing he'd ever seen so far. But here he came in, and he, she said immediately, "Here, I need you to knead this bread. I have so many other things going on right now. Can you just start kneading the bread?" And he went over to the bowl and he started to knead. And she said, wait, I don't know where your hands have been. You need to go wash your hands. And so he went and washed his hands, and he came back and he kneaded the bread and started kneading the bread. And they got to chatting and asked, how's your day and what's going on? And she told him, of course, that, I think he already knew, but because Death is pretty much one of those all-knowing guys. But she said, oh yeah, no, I'm just getting ready for my birthday party, 97 today. I'm so excited. And he congratulated her on that and said, yes, that's a nice long life, far above the average I've seen. And as soon as he was done kneading the bread, she said, okay, now I need you to stir this soup and just keep it moving slowly, but not too fast. And so he kept stirring slowly, and it was just one task after another. Here, take the cookies out. Here, open the cookies out. All afternoon. And finally, at one point, Death goes, Rose, you know who I am, right? And she goes, yes, I do. I do know who you are, and I know what's coming. But honestly, I just thought I had time for this one last birthday party. I thought you were coming a little bit later. And he said, okay, well, okay, I'll do that then. And so he stayed there and helped her finish up. And finally it got to afternoon, and afternoon got to evening, and the guests started to arrive. And she heard a knock on the door. Rose heard a knock on the door and said, oh, Death, go open the door quick, please. Let them in and tell them, have them seated. And so Death opened the door, and it was Rose's daughter. Now, Rose's daughter recognized Death immediately and started to cry and plead. And Death thought, okay, this is how I normally get reacted to. And she's crying, where's my mom? Where's my mom? And finally, Rose called from the kitchen, oh, honey, I'm in here. I'm sorry, I forgot how that would be when I had Death answer the door. I'm so sorry. And still, the daughter came in and helped finish up, and the rest of the guests came, and Rose noticed that Death was kind of hiding in the corner. And she went over and talked to him and said, Death, come on, come and meet my friends. You helped do this party. You got to participate and be part of it. And from then on, she made him play games with the kids, and she made him drink and chat with the family and her friends. She introduced him to everyone. And before long, he was just having a great time, and the evening went so quick. And finally it was just the two of them, and Rose got up and walked into the kitchen and started cleaning. And because he was in the habit now, he started helping her clean too. And finally she just paused and she goes, oh yeah, you came for me today, didn't you? Is it time? And Death said, gosh, Rose, it's been so much fun hanging out with you and meeting your family. I would love to just put this off until next year. And Rose was like, oh my goodness, of course, you're invited to next year's party. Please do come. And for a few years later, after Death would come on her birthday every day, early in the morning, and he would help and work with her all day long. And he would visit and party with her family and friends afterwards. And this went on for several years. And then finally, he came on her 101st birthday. And as they were putting a pie in the oven and getting everything finished up, Rose said, Death, I'm really tired. I think it's time. I think after this party, I think I'll go with you to wherever we go. And Death said, all right. And so at the party, she said her goodbyes, and Death said his goodbyes as well to all of the friends. And by now, Death had become such a family friend that it was just natural for them to feel like, of course, Grandma's going off with a good, trusted friend. Yeah. So that one wasn't spooky at all. Sorry about that. I'm just kidding. So Out here, I've been meeting people at Riverton, Wyoming. I've been going to the different restaurants and meeting a lot of different people. And it's been really great and a whole lot of fun. And you run into all different kinds of people. I went to Taco Bell for the very first time, and somebody bought me dinner for just for having just for being me. It's like I felt like I needed to meet you, and I thought that was really cool. And well, I was sitting at the coffee shop one day, and a woman comes up, and she sits right next to me. Now this is kind of weird, like strangers, it feels weird, but it was kind of crowded, and so I thought, all right, maybe I'm the most comfortable person that she could find to sit with, and it was really cool. It turned out to be just in time because she had this huge book of ghost stories, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Ghost stories. And she said, oh yes, I love ghosts. I love meeting ghosts and talking to them and finding out their stories. And I thought, that's so strange because things like that never happened to me. And she goes, what? They don't? And I was like, oh yeah, no, things like that never happened to me. I'm just like, my friend took me out to a church one time, and we were supposed to sit there after midnight, and there was supposed to be a ghost that would appear in the church with two red eyes. Thought this, and it didn't happen. And I told him that. I said, things like that just don't happen to me. She said, oh, that's so sad, so sad. And finally the waitress came, and I said I would have, I got a little bacon and eggs breakfast. And I said, and I don't know what my friend is having. And the waitress said, who? And I looked, and she was not there. The waitress swore she was never there. Interesting. So I didn't hear the laugh. Okay, anyway. No, what did I? Yeah, okay. There we go. That's better. I'm just kidding. So let's see. I have one more. It turns out this spooks more people. I have made this one up in comedy or for comedy. So yeah. But this is a crybaby one about me because I've been having a rough time. It's been kind of hard meeting new people here, and so yeah, it reminded me that years ago, for some reason, I thought it would be the coolest thing to get into a fight at a bar, and it turned out it's just completely immoral to fight me. So nobody would fight me, and I was complaining about this, that and then it moved on. You know how ruminating goes. It just spirals downward more and more and more. And I thought about that time that a pencil got stuck under the seat in my car, and I couldn't reach it, and my stupid fingers wouldn't twist the right way to grab it, and I can't get, yeah, it was just, I was just complaining to my nephew as who this was. I was complaining to my nephew, and it was so sad. I was just getting it worse and worse, and anything he said didn't help. I came up with a sad answer to all of it. And so finally he had to go to bed, and he told me so. And I was like, see, and I just bother everyone with stuff. And he goes, well, Uncle, you know what? If I could, I would trade arms with you. And I thought, oh, that's so sweet. Wasn't that sweet of him? He's such a good kid. So I woke up the next morning and was thinking about that whole conversation, and I was feeling a little bit better and, a little more positive. And so, but the one thing that stuck was that he had offered to trade arms with me. And I thought, oh, would that even work? And so I looked it up, and it turns out because of these wars in Afghanistan and the explosive devices over there, they've had enough medical practice on patients with losing full arms and legs that they can now do a full arm transplant. And it's pretty successful most of the time. It takes quite a bit of rehabilitation and stuff like that. But I thought that was really cool. So I sent my nephew a link, and I said to him, here, read this. And then I said, you're an organ donor, right? And he said, of course, that he was an organ donor. And I said, yes, this is great. This is great. And that was step one. So step two involved a week later. It turns out that over the years, I've been grooming my nephews. Not like that, not like that. I've been having my nephews learn to try anything I tell them to try. So if I say, climb up on that rock, because I can't climb a rock, so I say things like, climb up on that rock and tell me what you see. What does it look like from up there? And they would do it. They love to do these things, and they love to do, they call them challenges, and they would be whole games. And so I said, hey, Jonathan, let's go rock climbing. And he said, yes, let's go rock climbing. I'm so excited. And so we went rock climbing, and I said, okay, here's the first challenge. You get to hoist me up there. And I'm going to try to climb as much as I can. But it did turn out that he was doing most of the lifting, the heavy lifting there. And he basically just hoisted me up the cliff. And then I said, okay, how are you at climbing? And he said, oh, I'm pretty good. I think this would be fun. And so of course, that meant that I was on belay. And I had to, if he started to fall, I was in charge of holding that rope. And of course, he did fall. And I held that rope as best I could, but I grabbed Don and it slid right through my hands. And all it really did was make sure that he landed safely on his back and protected those beautiful arms of his. So here I am now realizing that the cliff we had chosen was a half mile from the car. And I still have my bad arms, my small arms. And so I thought, what was I thinking? And anyway, I had the rope on him, and here I am reaching out under his arms, around his chest, and trying to lug him. And sure enough, the park ranger came by. And he's like, stop, what are you doing? He saw me pulling a dead body, and I was like, he said, put your hands up. And I was like, I can't put my hands up, I'm sorry. And he said, well, put them behind your back. And I was like, they don't fit behind my back either. And he was like, all right, well, and he grabs me by my bicep like my dad did when I was in trouble. And he sits me in the back of his cop car and closes the door. And then we start to chat. And I told him in the car, I had brought it with me, but in the car, I told him in the glove box where to find the paperwork. And it turns out Jonathan, my nephew, had actually done this thing for me, and we had all the paperwork finalized. And it was an accident that he had fallen. It wasn't my fault that, whatever, I'm not sure. Anyway, he helped me get Jonathan into the car and took him to the hospital as fast as we could so that those arms would stay fresh. And over the next few months, I got these new arms put on, and it was great. It was a lot of fun for the first little bit. And then things started to happen weird. I reached up to scratch my head once, and I cut myself because I pushed so hard. I pulled like a whole gob of hair out of my head because I didn't realize I had gotten that, these arms are much stronger than I thought. And yeah, things like that were happening. And then the other thing that happened really weird was when I went into rooms, people started to ignore me. And I thought, wow, that's strange, because my whole life I've been used to walking into a room and people, at least glance at me and wonder. And, all of that stuff I was saying about, are they fearful? Are they wondering about me? Well, it turns out when you have normal arms and you just walk and look like everybody else, you become invisible. And in fact, it's no longer immoral for people to fight me. And so sure enough, at the bar one night, I got bumped and pushed into the meanest guy at the bar. And without even thinking, he turned around and decked me and knocked me out completely. I'm laying on the floor, blacked out, apparently, because I don't remember this part. I just remember waking up at the hospital. And my doctor's standing there and checking me over, and realized I had woken up, and he said, oh, good, you're awake. And so we started chatting, and he asked, how's the new arms? And I was like, I don't like him. I really don't like him at all. It was kind of a terrible failed experiment, but whatever. And he goes, well, I was wondering about that when you asked me to change your arms. So he opened up a drawer, and there were my arms. I mean, they're already shriveled and small. It wasn't like they were getting any smaller. And so there they were. And he said, would you like them back? And I was like, oh, please, please, please. And sure enough, I got my arms back, and I wore this tank top so you could see these beautiful arms. Aren't they wonderful? Nice, beautiful arms. I love them so much. Glad to have them back. Life is back to normal. Except I really miss my nephew. All right. I think that's enough from me, everybody. Thanks for sticking in and listening and coming to visit. I wish I could be up there, and yeah, but I'm saving up money so that I can make sure and be there for celebration the day after Thanksgiving. So
Great, thanks, Mitch.
Yep.
Always good stories, and Mitch is talking about not being able to get in a bar fight, but he ought to go to Wales where they do shin kicking contests so, with heavy boots. So anyway, there's something for everybody out there, isn't there? So anyway, we'll hear more from Mitch on Celebration the night after Thanksgiving at New Traditions Cafe right over there. So we've got a little bit of time before our next break. So John, would you like to tell your story now? Sure. Okay, so John's down from Sequim, made the big trip down here. We appreciate him coming down to always join us here at the Harbor House for storytelling.
Hi, you know that old saying, I walk a mile for a camel? Well, I'd walk a lot of miles to hear Mitch. Let me tell you. 1952, I'm 6.5 years old. I'm downstairs in the basement with my dad. My dad's always in the basement doing something, and I'm always there to help. Hey, Dad, can we go over the dump? You ask me that every day. You think our house is full of garbage and we gotta go to the dump every day? Well, Mom's always throwing things away. I wish your mother would throw some things away. I tell you what, by this weekend, I think we can go. How many days till the weekend? 3. We'll go Saturday. Well, are we gonna go on the weekend or are we gonna go on Saturday? We'll go on Saturday. He always shook his head like this when he talked to me. Excuse me. Saturday morning, I wake up. I get my clothes on. I run downstairs, put my green boots on. I run down the back stairs, and there he is. He's got his Model A with a big, huge red light on top that says stop. Because he's a fireman, a real fireman. What I'm going to be when I get older. But I'm going to have a bigger light. He's loading up the truck, the Model A. He's got it almost loaded. I'm helping him. He puts these 2 big garbage cans on top. Then he gets some rope and ties it all down. My dad can do a lot of things. He's really good. Off we take across 6th Street, down Star Hill. Now, we're the 3rd highest house in Juneau. But we live on Star Hill. We go down, we go across 6th Street, past the hospital, and you gotta be quiet because there's a little sign that says quiet hospital. We get there, we go down a few more, we go over a few more down. I know how to get to the hospital, and that's about all. We get to the flatland, we're going along, and then we go by City Cafe, and that's where my friend Karen's, her parents own that. We go past that, and there's a big, huge metal, like a spaceship, and it's all red because it's got a fire in it. My dad says they burn all the lumber in there that they can't sell, and it is hot. You can feel it in our Model A. We go past that, then we go by the rock dump. Now, the rock dump is not the dump. The rock dump has got rocks in it. They're the rocks from the mine that didn't have any gold, so they put it there. We go past the rock dump, I can see smoke. The dump's always on fire. We pull into the dump. Dad backs up. Don't go far. Stay right by the car. You know why. You know what's out there. I know what's out there. I got out, started walking. I had my boots on, and there's a lot of mud puddles. And as all normal little boys go, I go to the mud puddles, right out into the middle. But I remember what my older cousin said. Hambone was his name. Hambone told me about the little boy who walked into a mud puddle and he disappeared. They never found him. I said, where did he go, Hambone? We don't know. We think there was a hole in the mud puddle. We think he went down that. So I was really careful. All of a sudden, the dump starts to stand up and it starts to shake. And I see him. He's all gray. He's got a bag hanging out of his mouth. It's a bear. He looks at me. He sees me. He looks at me. I start backing up. My butt runs into somebody. My heart falls into the mud puddle. I told you to stay by the truck. I start breathing. Let's go sit in the truck, watch the bear for a few minutes, safer. We got on the truck and we watched this bear go through bag after bag, boxes. He was eating everything. I wouldn't eat it because it stunk. And I never figured out why people keep all that stinky stuff in their house. We watched and I said, I could stay here all day, Dad. He says, we gotta go home, your mom's waiting. Okay, so we got ready to go and he pokes me. I jump. He points. And there comes another bear with two little baby bears. It walks to the same mud puddle I'm in. And it stands up like this. And the little babies stand up and they all were looking around. And then they see that other bear. They tend down. My dad says, that other bear, you're gonna come over and kill those two cubs. They wouldn't kill those cubs, they're too nice, Dad. That's bears. They don't do that. So that mama bear started running off and the little babies there, and they ran up the mountain. Well, we went home and I talked the whole way and told Dad how things were. We get home a few months later, we're having dinner, and my sister jumps up from the dinner table, runs out to the back porch and says, there's a bear in our garbage. So we all get there. I get a chair and look out there, and we turn the light on, we're watching this bear. He turns around and just makes sure we're watching him, he eats and that. My mom goes and gets a camera. And she gets one of those light bulbs and she puts it on a silver thing, and she takes a picture. Right. Then she has me hold my hands, she pushes a little button, out pops that thing. Boy, it's hot in the farm. Pretty soon I have that thing in my mouth. It's like there I go. 2 months go by and we get the film back. And all there is a silver spot in the middle of the picture. That's Elle. She did that for years. We never did get a picture. The problem was, my dad should have taken the picture. He knew more about bears. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, John. Who could have guessed that a trip to the dump could be so much fun? It always is, isn't it? So we've got some time before we take our break. Why don't we have another story? Pam Maben, I think, is online up here. Pam, are you ready to tell a story for us?
I'm not planning to tell tonight.
Oh, Anne is though.
Oh, maybe it's Ann.
Well, Ann is, I know, but I thought you'd send me a thing, Pam. Okay,
Sorry.
you're out of here. Okay. Anyway, thanks anyway. So Ann, are you ready to tell a story? Hello, Ann, are you there?
Yes. Hold on a minute. I'm here, but I just want to make sure I'm not glaring at everybody. It's just I went very dark in the room, so I put this extra light up. Is that okay?
You look beautiful. So welcome to the storytelling here in October, and we're ready for your story.
Okay, I'm practicing on you guys. I'm going to tell this in Telebration, and so this is you're my practice group. My name's Annie. I'm part of the farm just down the way there. The whole family lives there. My grandfather's the one in charge. Well, he comes to me this day and he says, Annie, the cows have got out to the long meadow. You need to go up there and see what the problem, fix the fence if it needs fixing. So I got on my horse, I got all my stuff, and off I went. Well, you should have seen the cows. They were everywhere. And there was this huge hole in the fence. Well, by the time I'd fixed it and got the cows back in, it had taken a long time and it was coming on dark. And it was getting a bit chilly. But I got on my horse, and my horse knew the way home, so I didn't bother. I just gave it a free head and got to thinking about stuff. When all of a sudden the horse stumbled and I nearly fell off. There was a pothole where there did not to be a pothole. Oh, and you know, the rain was beginning to come down. I hadn't got a coat. I mean, I hadn't needed a coat in the afternoon, so I didn't have one. I was going to get soaking before I got home. I wonder if there was any shelter around about. And, well, there was a cottage beside the road. And I could swear there had not been a cottage when I'd come up in the morning. But, you know, you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. So a cottage meant warmth and to be dry. And, you know, most people around here are friendly like. So I went on over and I tied my horse up, and up I went and up the steps and onto the porch, and then knocked on the door. But there was no answer, and I thought, I'll have to stay on the porch, even if it is cold and windy. And then I thought, no, try again, Anne. There's a light there. There must be somebody in. So I knocked a bit harder, and the door flew open. But there wasn't anybody in the room. And I called out, hello, the house. But nobody came. And, you know, just in front of me, there was this fire, and it was crackling. And it looked so warm and inviting. I thought, well, maybe I could just go in. You know, if the people come back, I'll explain. So I went on into the fire, and oh, it made me feel so comfortable and warm. And there was a settee there to sit on. And so I sat down. And I'm thinking, oh, this is much better than riding in the rain, when I heard someone calling my name. Annie. Annie. Who is calling? Annie. I got up. I went to have a look in the through the door that was open in the living room, but it was the kitchen and there was no one there. Annie. So I went back out onto the porch to see if there was anybody there, but there wasn't anybody there. And my horse wasn't there either. It had gone. I went back into the living room and I sat down by the fire and sort of waited. And by here, didn't someone jump out of a cupboard that I hadn't noticed before? But it wasn't that. I mean, this was a tall man with bright red hair, and he's shaking his stick at me. But it wasn't that. It was that I knew the man. I knew him for Patrick Rooney. I'd been engaged to Patrick Rooney. Patrick Rooney was dead. He died in a boating accident 2 years ago. Patrick Rooney was dead. And yet, oh, I just could not stop. I could not stay. I turned and I ran out of that house as fast as I could go. I ran across the road and into, well, it was bushes and scrub and all sorts of things. I didn't care. I was just needing to get away from that. I ran and I ran and I ran and I ran until I couldn't run any more. I ran right up against a tree, turned myself around and on the ground. Well, it stopped raining. I was beginning to feel a bit better when I heard the voices. What shall we do with him, the blackguard? Why don't we take him over to yonder tree? Over there? What about that tree? Well, I was under a tree and there weren't any other ones that I could see. Oh, better just see than be seen, thought I, and I clambered right up into the branches and hid myself in the leaves. Not just in time, because two men, kind of scruffy looking men, came along with this long box on their shoulders that kind of looked like a coffin. Well, they took it off and they put it down on the ground and they took off the lid. It was a coffin. It was Patrick Rooney's coffin. He's lying in it as pale could be, with his arms crossed and his eyes closed. And then the men did a strange thing. They went off and began collecting sticks, as though they were going to make a fire. And then they got some long branches and they proceeded to cross them over and put a pole between them, and they had a handle. It was just like they were building a spit over the fire. It was then that I felt some eyes on me. And when I looked down into that coffin, Patrick Rooney was looking up at me. Oh, he looking into my very soul, and I pulled myself back into the branches, and he kept his eyes open. And those two men, they came over and lifted him up, took him over to the spit and tied him on it. And then one man said to the other, "Who's going to turn him while we're away?" "Well, we'll set the fire and then..." And Patrick Rooney said, "Annie." And he's looking up at me in the tree. I don't know how he could see me. I was in the leaves. But with him looking, they started looking. And then Pat, "You better come down, Annie, or it'll be the worse for you." So I came down. And I said to them, I don't know what this is about. What do you expect me to do?" "Well, you've got to turn the spit to stop him from burning, haven't you?" And so I began to turn the spit and they disappeared. And here I am with Patrick Rooney on the spit with his eyes open, looking at me as I turned that spit. And it was really strange. It was so strange that I quite forgot to turn it. "It's burning me, you are. Turn away. It'll be the worse for you, Annie." Oh, sorry. And I began to turn that spit again. But you know, it had been a strange evening. I mean, there'd been the pothole where there shouldn't have been a pothole, and there was the cottage. I mean, where had it? "Annie, I'll be the death of you." So I turned to look at Patrick Rooney, and there he was, unslinging himself from the hook. Well, of course I didn't stop. Of course I didn't stay. I just ran away as fast as I could go, and I ran and ran and ran and ran, and there was a cottage, and up the steps I went and in through the door, and oh, there was a fire. It sort of was welcoming me, and a settee, and I sat down on the settee, and the fire crackled, and I began to feel a lot easier in my mind. And it must have been that I fell asleep, because when I woke up, I'm lying on a hillside. The grass was my pillow, and my horse was grazing by my side. There was no pothole. There was no cottage. There was no cupboard, and there was no Patrick Rooney. Thank goodness. So I thought, right, I'm going home. I got onto the horse and we got home. And when I got there, they said to me, where the hell have you been? I said, well, yeah, you know, this strange thing happened to me. And I told them the whole story and they laughed. They said, don't believe you, Annie. Good grief, that's some story you've just told us. But, you know, doesn't it happen to you when something strange happens to you? You've got to keep talking about it. It keeps churning in your mind and you've got to keep telling people. And they got fed up. Would you stop that, Annie? I don't want to hear that story anymore. Stop it. Stop it. For goodness sake, Annie, if you need to tell that story anymore, go tell someone else. So I have. And I want to thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ann, for telling this story again. Well, it's getting a little bit dark, but still light enough to go out and enjoy the outside for a few minutes. So why don't we take about a 5-minute break and then we'll come back, have a few commercial announcements and get into the next part of our storytelling with Maggie, Toby, and Brett. Okay? And anybody else would like to tell a story? If anybody up there in Zoom land wants to tell a story, please let us know during the break and we'll get you in right away. Thank you. Going to have a storyteller. Maggie is going to be the next one up. Come on, Maggie.
Okay, I need to stand back here.
Yeah.
That's good.
Looking good.
Okay, well, this is a very short little story, and this story is part from European folktales, but it comes through the Ozark Mountains with a twist.
Okay.
Okay, so one day there was this pretty young woman walking down the street when she heard a whistle and someone called out, "Hey there, Toots." She stopped. She looked up and down the street. There wasn't anybody there. She looked all around. She looked down. There was a little old toad frog on the sidewalk. Well, she stepped out and started walking. She walked, and there she heard again a whistle. "Hey there, beautiful." She stopped. She looked all around, up and down the street. There wasn't anybody there. She looked down. There was that little old toad frog. Well, she started walking again when there it was again. "Hey there, anything going on tonight there, honey?" She stopped. She put her hands on her hips. She looked all around. There was no one in sight. She looked down. There was that little old toad frog. She said, "Well, I guess at least I know it wasn't you." When that little toad frog stretched up on his little bandy legs and said, "Yep, it was me all right. By rights, I am a handsome young man, but an evil witch put a spell on me, and here I am." "Oh," said this pretty girl. "Oh, that's too bad. Isn't there anything you can do about it?" And he said, "There is one thing. To reverse the spell, a pretty young woman has to pick me up and set me on her pillow and let me sleep with her all night long." Well, she thought it over, and she thought that was the least she could do. So she picked up that little old toad frog, carried him home. That night, when she got in bed, she put the toad frog on her pillow and she went to sleep. She slept all night long. In the morning, her father came to the door to wake her up. He looks in there and he sees in bed with his daughter a handsome young man. And he starts yelling and hollering and questioning her. And she sits up in bed and she says, "But Daddy, it was a little toad frog yesterday and an evil witch put a spell on him, you see. And all I had to do was let him sleep on my pillow and he changed back. See, Dad, that was it." But her dad, he didn't believe a word of it, as I'm sure You don't either.
And we wondered how that was all going to end. So, okay, thank you, Maggie and Toby. Would you like to tell the story now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. I gotta say, Toby came out to an event we had at State Park last Saturday and gave a great story about a fish. It was a fish bait, and she told a great story I loved about the fish. So we'll hear that again sometime.
Brett and I were teachers in Malaysia, and our salary was like a pittance. So when we were able to secure jobs in the country of Indonesia, we were ecstatic. Brett was going to be a principal of a small school with 80 students, and I was going to teach grade 6. The best thing of all was they were going to give us a house. We were just so thrilled. But our Malaysian friends said to us, "Jangan pergi di sana, sakti di sana banyak kuat. Don't go there. The magic there is very, very strong." But I thought, magic. So we go to Indonesia, and there we are taken to this cute little bungalow. And the vice, the vice principal, Mrs. Moharm, she shows us around. And now, Toby and Brett, this is your living room. I went, living room? Oh my gosh, there's a couch. We don't have to sit on the floor anymore. And then, look, Brett, look out the window. There's this cute little woven basket with hibiscus plants on it. Now, come on, that is like welcome wagon stuff. Oh, I felt so welcome, so accepted. The house was a 5-minute walk to the school. And every day I would go by this well with water in it. And it was just outside of the village, the kampong. And the well was old, they had moss growing on it. And right next door to it was this beautiful banyan tree that just hung its branches over this well with those big leaves to shade the villagers who would come in for water. That morning, I asked my friend Listari, who taught PE at the school, "Hey, what's this well? It just looks so beautiful." "Ah, Toby, that Perigi, the well, ada cerita istimewa. It's got a very interesting story." Zaman dulu, long ago, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, in that village, there was a terrible drought. The well became bone dry and nothing would grow around the village, and people started to die. Now the mayor, the Pangulu of the village, of course he was very, very concerned, but what to do? And then he heard that the Putra, the princess of that area, she was going to be coming through his village. What was he to do? She would be thirsty, of course, and she's a royal person. So he got a small cup and he went to each house in the village, and the villagers graciously gave him 1 teaspoon of water until the cup was full. And he waited by the well. Soon he heard the kompang, kopang, kompang, kopang, the drumming of her guards of the princess. And soon she came to the well. "Oh, I'm very, very thirsty." And the Pungulu said, "Oh, princess, here's the cup of water." And of course she drank it very quickly. "Oh, I am still thirsty." And she saw the bucket on the edge of the well. "Well, I will just go." But the Pungulu said, "Princess, there is no..." Too late. She dropped the bucket into the well. "Guards, pull up the rope." The guards did. And they grabbed this bucket, put it on the edge, and it was sloshing with water. And she took that cup. "Oh, Mr. Mayor Pungulu, this is the sweetest water I have ever had. And from that day on, that well never went dry. I thought, oh God, Miss Starry, that's a really interesting story. This is such an interesting country to live in. The thing is though, Brett and I, our health started to deteriorate. And I got what I would call a nondescript tropical disease. I would be teaching away to the grade 6 students, and then wham, I'd be hit with this incredible fever. I would just be dripping. I would be so tired, I'd have to sit down. Okay, boys and girls, get out your books and 10 minutes of silent reading. And after 10 minutes, I was fine. And I'd start teaching again. Brett, he got hepatitis. So our health was not very good. One late afternoon after school, I'm walking home, and then I notice I can see our house. There's something shining, something reflecting from the roof. I thought, the sun is hitting something. What is that? So that evening, I asked Brett, hey, what's that thing shining on top of our roof? Ooh. Toby, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that. Well, why? Well, you know how our house is at a T-junction, yeah? The road goes directly into our door, into our house. It's a direct path for spirits that are roaming around, go through our house, and that mirror is deflecting that road to trick the spirits. Oh, aha, I thought. Is that why the rent in our house is so low and that the water and the electricity is free? Yeah, no Indonesian would live in this house, only a foreigner. Oh, whoa. Okay, now I understand. And then that cute little basket with the hibiscus plant. Yeah, it's an offering for the spirits. Oh boy. Well, then Brett took off for a conference in Singapore. And one evening after dinner, I went into the room and I was reading and I got really sleepy. So I lay down in the bed and I fell asleep. But suddenly I woke up because I looked around and I said, I could feel something in this room. And then there is something on my chest. It felt like this big boulder. I could hardly breathe, but there was nothing there. And I just yelled out, Peggy DeLuan, get out, get out. And the weight suddenly lifted off my chest. Well, the next morning, I definitely asked Liz Starry, yang itu, what was that? Toby, yang itu hantu gemuk, that fat ghost, probably wandering around in your neighborhood, and then saw your door and was able to go through. Well, I don't want that thing in my house. Jangan bimbang, Toby, don't worry. I will solve it for you. And so the next day, Liz Starry comes into my classroom with this cage, and she sets it on the table and takes off the cloth. It's a parrot about this size, Alexandrine parrot, red feathers, green feathers, and a little mustache underneath its feet. Toby, you have to have something alive in your house. Okay? So after school, I took that cage and I hung it on a hook in the dining room. So I felt very, very safe. And that night, went to sleep soundly. What in the heck is that? This squawking noise. It's the parrot. So I opened the door and there was that parrot. It was going nuts. It was squawking and flapping around in the cage. And surrounding that cage, though, was a swirling mist of gray fog. And it went around the cage, went down onto the ground, up over the dining room table. and then just dissipated through the screen porch, like molecules doing diffusion, and disappeared. And the parrot was calm again. Well, that morning for sure, the next morning, I went and told the star, she goes, the starry, my friend, oh, Toby, masala, the star, big problem. You are going to need the help of Idupu, the medicine man. But don't worry, Toby. My cousin, sister's brother's son is a Dukun. And so the starry made arrangement for the Dukun to come, the medicine man, and of course the whole family was there. They came and he did some chants and he sprinkled holy water around the house and in the house, and each corner of the house he put in big nails pointing out, so the spirits would get pierced if they dare come back into the house. Well, I gotta tell you, my nondescript tropical disease went away. Brett, his hepatitis went away, and the bird became very, very calm. So the following year, Brett then again went to Singapore. This was towards the end of the school year, so he had to go on a recruiting fair to try to hire new teachers to come work at the school. So he was gone, and he would be gone a week. Well, the next morning I woke up to go and brush my teeth, and I turned on the spigot, and out came this incredible stench. It was dirty, filthy water that was gray in color, stagnant, because you could see all these little bubbles as it filled up my sink. There was no way I could brush my teeth. So I immediately went into the kitchen, and our housekeeper, Poochie, was there. Poochie, what's wrong with the water? Oh, Toby, bad news. What? A chemical factory has dumped its waste in the city reservoir, and it is polluted, and there are dead fish floating around. Oh no, okay. So I immediately went to this little supermarket to get bottled water, but it was gone. Everyone had bought it out. All that was left was one crate of soda water. So I bought that, took it home, and we cooked with it. We brushed our teeth with it, but soon we didn't have anything left. I said, Poochie, what are we going to do? Okay, Toby, look. We'll go to the well by the village. And so we did. We carried the jerry cans and we filled the water from the well. And it was sweet, and it was clean, and it was clear. And we carted the jerry cans back and filled the bathtub. And that's what we use for cooking and bathing. Now, meanwhile, Brett's in Singapore, and he was leaving that evening to come back to Indonesia, back home. And Brett and I, whenever we would pass through Singapore on our way back to Indonesia, we'd always visit the card lady. And the card lady, she was very, very holy, and she read cards at the Buddhist temple. She could tell our fortunes. So Brett was there, and I had asked him, okay, these are the 3 questions I want you to ask the card lady when you see her. Brett sits down, and the card lady has these playing cards, and they are so worn out, so well used, but you couldn't even read the numbers. You didn't even know if it was a king or a queen. But what she would do is, as she would put the cards down, you would think of 3 questions you want to ask her. So she is putting the first card down, and she just stops. And she looks at Brett. You need to go home now. Your wife is very angry and upset. You need to go home now. And she wouldn't even she didn't even ask Brett for the 3 questions. So Brett was coming back home anyway that evening. So when he came home, I just gave him an earful, and you would not believe, and the water was so yucky. Oh, Brett. But Brett, being Brett, very calm, just told me, relax. I have some good news. Yeah, what? Well, I hired new teachers, basically to take our place. We will be teaching in Singapore. I go, oh, whoa. New country, new culture, new spirits.
No more big problem, huh?
No more big problem.
Okay, before Brett comes up here for wrap up, once again, does anybody up in Zoom land want to tell a story? Because we do have a little bit of time left. Okay, well, before Brett comes up, we're going to once more remind everybody about Celebration. It's the night after Thanksgiving, like we say. You're sick of the turkey and you got those relatives finally on the plane or on the car and they're all gone and you're wondering what to do. Come on down to the New Traditions Cafe. And let's see, we don't have a time on here, but I think we said starts at 7, but you can make a reservation, come at 6. They don't have dinners anymore, but they do have some drinks and foods, small plates, sort of a bar type thing. It's a lot of fun, so please come and do it and tell your friends about it and bring them. We've got a great piano player that's going to sort of be playing.
Oh, yeah.
Linda Boyer, before we start telling our stories and an intermission too. So we've got some other things going on too. So, but we're not going to tell you about those. It's going to be a surprise. So you need to be there. Okay, and once again, here's the hat. And for those of you who are listening on Zoom, we do have a PayPal account at southsoundstory.org. And please contribute and help us keep paying the rent on this and our insurance and everything so we're all healthy and good. And now our treasurer, Brett's going to get up and tell probably a wise fool story. Oh, okay.
How is that? Is that too high or too low?
No, it's good.
Good,
Looking
okay.
good, right?
Good thing I brought the control with me. There's something I should tell you about Toby and I. When I was a young Peace Corps volunteer, I was assigned up to Kelantan, which is in the northern part of Malaysia. And it's a very poor area, in some ways very backward, but it's also really the home of traditional culture. It's kind of like the Appalachians because the people there are considered not hillbillies, but at least backwards. But one thing that's very strong there is their belief in magic. And so when I went there, I found a house in the village where I was going to be teaching. My landlady was so old that she remembered when the British came. Wonderful person. And so she sat me down and she said, you know, I'm glad you're here, but you have to be careful because you know how everybody here in this area uses magic. And of course, this conversation was all taking place in Malay. So, which I sort of spoke at the time. And I said, yes, I know that. I know the women are supposed to, you know, be very beautiful, but also have magic, use magic. And she said, yes, that's true. So here's what we're going to do. I know this Bomo, which is like a medicine man, a witch doctor, and we'll go see him and he'll make it safe for you because I don't want one of these women to put a spell on you and make you marry them. So, and they'll want to do that because you're an American and they want to go to America and be wealthy. So we went and saw the Bomo, and this had to be taking place at dusk, and I had to wear the special stuff, and they burned things, and there was stuff to smell, and there was stuff to pour over my head. And he did a ceremony, and he said, well, now, Cikgu, that's a term for teacher, Cikgu, you don't have to worry. I've put a I protected you against all spells and curses for 7 years. No woman is going to be able to make you marry them. So you don't have to worry. And I'm pretty strong. The only way that this could work is if somebody went to Sumatra, where they have even more powerful bomos, and they put a spell on you, but I don't think you have to worry about that. So you are safe for 7 years. So I thought, whoa, that's lucky. And went on and I did my Peace Corps, and then I worked as a contract teacher. And then I got hired to do Peace Corps training groups. And I did a Peace Corps training group, and I went to pick up my first group of Peace Corps trainees, and one of them was, of course, Toby. And I was sort of thinking about what my experiences were about living in this place, Clanton, in the north, and I looked at the date, and I realized it was exactly 7 years ago that the Bomo started protecting me against women who wanted to marry me. Toby would never admit to having been to Sumatra, so. I do have a story about the inhabitants of Chelm, which is a city in Eastern Europe. And most of the people there have a particularly simplified view of the world. I'll put it that way. They do things in a funny fashion. And this one is about the leader of this group called Gronen, and he has a council of 5 wise men. And one of them, Znevel, comes to him one day, and he's got this big tub, and in the tub is a carp. So he says, Gronen, you know, in appreciation for all that you do for our town and our village, I'd like to present you with this carp, and your wife will do like all the other wives in Chelm do. We'll make it into gefilte fish so that you can eat it on the Sabbath. And he thought, great. And he looked at the carp. The carp was quite big. And he said, you know what they say, I'm going to look at the tail, because if the tail is big, that means the brain is big. And if I eat the carp and he has a big brain, that will help me be smarter. So Gronen went over to look at the carp. And as he bent over, this carp gave a big splash and smacked him in the face with the tail. And he jumped back. Everybody jumped back. They were all shocked. No one ever treated the leader of the town like that. That was outrageous. And he said, well, I'm not going to eat this fish. He's obviously poorly brought up. He's cruel and mean. And I bet his brain is small. So if I eat this fish, I will become stupid and mean. So I can't eat this fish, but he can't get away with this. And the leaders, the wise men of Helm, all agreed that he must be punished for this rudeness. So they said, okay, well, we have to make sure that this fish gets the message. What will we do? And one person suggested, well, we could hang him. We could do that. But then they said, no, fish don't have necks, so we can't hang him. And what else could we do? Well, we could throw him to the dogs. Then the dogs would all be stupid. So we can't throw him to the dogs. And at this point, Gronen put his finger to his head, which was a sign that he's thinking. He says, well, I can't think of the appropriate punishment for this carp at this time. Let's keep him alive. We'll put him in a big tank. We'll put him in a tub. We'll hire Schlemiel to come put water in so that he doesn't die. And they would feed him crumbs of bread and things like that. And I will think what will be the most appropriate way to punish this carp. So they did. And of course, Gronen was very busy attending to the affairs of Chelm. And after about 6 months, the carp had grown quite big. And the people were pressing him for a solution. So he thought, and at last he had the right idea. He said, I have the solution. I have the solution. And they all gathered around. He said, we must drown this carp. That way he will get the message, and he can tell when he's drowning, he can tell all the other fish that you don't treat people in Chelm like this. So they brought out the cart that they used to carry the criminals to the to the gibbet where they would be hung. and they played the muffled drum as the cart rolled through the town, and they went down to the side of the lake where the mayor's bodyguard picked up this huge carp and threw him into the water. And he made a giant splash and disappeared. And the people rejoiced at this wisdom. And the young women threw flowers, and they picked up Groner and they carried him into town, and they all rejoiced. It says, now that carp is going to die. And sure enough, over the next few months, they tried fishing the lake. They didn't catch him. Of course, they caught a lot of other fish who were eaten, but not the big carp. And they thought, well, see, this is proof that the carp is dead, that they haven't been able to catch him. I think maybe the carp got smart and just hid away. But they wanted to be sure that if that carp came back, that he would be taken care of. So the wise men of Chelm published an order, and they printed it in capital letters, that if this carp is returned, we will catch him and we'll put him in a big tank, and he will stay there for the rest of his life.
Thank you, Brett. It was interesting to hear about the wise men in Chelm. So Annie said she would like to tell a story before we call it quits tonight. So Annie Coverly.
So I haven't ever told this story before, and I didn't even plan it. But the other day on the radio, I heard an NPR, one of those stories about unsung heroes. And I thought, I have one of those stories. So back when my girls were little, I was newly divorced. I didn't even have a car. I was living in kind of a crummy apartment in Green Lake. And a friend of mine moved over to Vashon Island, and she said, oh, come over, you know. So I packed my diaper bag and, you know, had my 4-year-old in one hand and my 2-year-old in the other. And we took the bus all the way to South, what is it? South something ferry? Southworth Ferry, yeah. So we got on the ferry, we rode over, all was well. You know, whenever I'm on a ferry, I always sit next to the box that has the life jackets in it. Just because, and I always think, you know, I'm a swimmer, so I always think, could I make it to shore as I look, you know, out? Anyway, it was not a scary boat ride on the way over there. I had a lovely weekend with her, and we came back, got on the same ferry to come home. Well, my youngest was at this stage, and some of you who've had kids will know this, wanted you to chase her. And so she would run away from you, you know, and even if I would yell at her, it was still like really exciting, you know. So we were on, you know how ferries have the car deck, and then there's the people deck, and then right above it, there's a little deck. You know, it's I don't know, it's maybe 8 feet high, 10 feet high. So it's not the car deck. But anyway, so she ran up to that deck and fell off onto the deck below, my littlest one. I mean, I think she was maybe 2 or something at that stage. She had a bloody nose, she was screaming. Nobody helped me. I was just bereft. It was horrible. You know, I gave her water, I tried to wash her face. I thought, my God, I mean, you know, there could be serious damage to her. So I was in the verge of sobbing myself. I got off the ferry, walked, since I had to go catch the bus from there, which is a long trip to get all the way back to Greenland. And a woman was out working in her backyard, working in her garden. And of course, tears were streaming down my face, and my baby had blood on her face and everything. You know, we walked by, and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not okay. This happened, you know." She said, "Well, come in the house." She came, I went into her house. She gave us all some water. She helped me wash Prairie up. And she said, "You know, this is serious. She could have a concussion. Who knows whatever else could happen." She put us in her car. She drove us to, I don't even remember if that was like some doctor or a clinic that was willing to see her. She got us in like I don't know, we were in the waiting room maybe 20 minutes. Miracle, if anybody's been to an emergency room before. And the doctor was great with us. She told us, you know, that wake her up every few hours, check her pupils, make sure she doesn't have a concussion or something like that. And that woman waited, she paid the bill, and she drove me all the way from that Southworth Ferry entrance back to where I lived in Greenland. Oh, God bless her. That's
Well, it's an uplifting story, so thank you everybody for being here this evening and for listening to the stories, telling the stories, visiting here. And for all of you on Zoom, thank you for taking part in this also. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add before we wrap it up? Right, Toby, Maggie?
No, see you at Celebration.
See you at Celebration, November 24th.
7 to 9 p.m.
7 to 9 p.m.
But come early for Simple Plates.
Right, Simple Plates start at 6, and the stories start promptly at 7 o'clock, so please don't be wandering in. Because we need to grab you and get your contribution before you go through the door too, so allow plenty of time for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.